Good morning, everybody. Uh, Honorable Ms. Geeta Mehta, Justice, Delhi High Court, Honorable Professor Singh, Vice Chancellor, National Law University, Honorable Ms. Shamina Shafiq, Member, National Commission for Women, Professor Vajpayee, Dr. Snanshu, Dr. Anju Tyagi, and other invited guests, speakers, and participants of this seminar. A warm welcome to NLU. On behalf of Institute of Chartered Management Association, which I took over, I was elected as the president last year, and we were invited by the National Commission for Women for looking into the surrogacy issues. The then chairperson, I had interaction with her, and she said, why don't you do a seminar on surrogacy? That's how we submitted a proposal, and the proposal was accepted. And then I approached Professor Singh. He was kind enough to provide the support. Now, coming to this seminar, I would put it across that it is estimated that at about 15% of couples around the world are infertile. It means fertility is an important concern globally. And historically, the surrogacy has been in existence in 1500 BC. Now, these are the surrogacy has taken a different shapes and dimensions in the present scenario. The present seminar, which is organized by National Institute of Chartered Management Association in collaboration with National Law University and in association with the National Commission for Women, shall be a path-breaking in this approach by giving new perspective and distance to the important emerging topic to doctors, psychologists, sociologists and legal experts, religious leaders, and businessmen who see a lot of business potential. The present seminar will throw light on these various concepts and issues. There has been encouraging response to this seminar. We received something around 300 abstracts, out of which it was a Herculean task by the team led by Dr. Anju Tyagi to screen the abstract. And in all, we finally got 50 abstracts cleared by the committee. And out of the 50, we received around 48 full paper, which is very, very good. Academically, in terms of the rigor, it has followed a lot of rigor, which is good for any kind of a research seminar. The first technical section of the seminar shall deliberate on commodification of baby-producing human entity and emergence of surrogacy as a trade. From outsourcing call centers to outsourcing pregnancy, India is becoming a destination. The idea of couple impregnating a woman located halfway across the world is nothing short of fantasies. The cost of surrogacy varies from country to country. The third world countries has a low cost associated with it. That's why it becomes a good fertility destination. The international or cross-border surrogacy raises serious questions of the law relating to citizenship, nationality, motherhood, parentage, and the right of a child to be raised by the parents. It is for these reasons that it is important for the intended parents to carefully assess the legal risk involved in surrogacy in the country the birth will occur and the country the child will be raised. In this context, the second technical section which shall explore the international dimensions of surrogacy, contracts, and issues related to regulation. The manner in which the surrogates are viewed by the society is also not casual. It is not as casual. Often in films, we come across surrogates being typically caricatured as white trash. This is absolutely prejudiced and unfair. The real reason, apart from monetary benefits, the surrogate mother experiences a sense of worth and empowerment. That's a very important element. It's the worth and empowerment of a surrogate mother by which she is taking up a cause of providing fertility to those who do not have the legitimate right to produce because of the biological reasons. She is providing that self-worth and self-empowerment. With this as a background, the psychosocial and medical ethics is the third session which is going to deliberate. The fourth and the final session shall discuss legal perspectives and policy issues of surrogacy and throw light on judicial aspects. For the protection and safeguarding the rights and health of the woman going for IVF techniques, recruited as surrogates, and children born through commercial surrogacy. Assisted Reproductive Technology Bill 2013 has been introduced. The present seminar shall also deliberate on the same. With that, thank you very much for giving me a patient hearing.
For a very informative overview. I must mention, and on behalf of my colleagues at NLU Delhi, must acknowledge that this conference is a brainchild of Dr. Rajesh Suri. The idea was conceived by him and we just followed it up. Thanks again. With this, may I invite for the inaugural address someone who is a member of the NLU family, not only because she has been a member of the Governing Council of NLU Delhi since 2008, but also I am talking about Honorable Ms. Justice Geeta Mittal, and this is, I have a 2-page note of her achievements, but of course I would emphasize that she has been a member of the family and she has been encouraging the students. Her affection towards the students and the university is well known. I remember that whether it's a small play, a literary activity, she is always there to encourage us. Thank you, madam, and please deliver that.
Professor Ranveer Singh, Dr. Rakesh Suri, Dr. Shamina Shafiq, Professor G.S. Vajpayee, very learned and respected faculty, members of the faculty, panelists, delegates, students, a very good morning to all of you. Right at the outset, I would like to plead that I always come to the university as a student with a lot of trepidation. I always commence my talks here with this statement that I am actually here to learn, and some of what I may say here today may seem completely, ignorant to you, may reflect my ignorance, because all of you are experts on the subject who are deliberating on one of the most important issues which we are just beginning to talk about. While preparing for this visit to the university for this program, I just happened to glance through what was happening the world over, and you find that whereas countries like the United Kingdom have been grappling with the several issues and have even formulated legislation as back as in the year 1990, we are yet to begin to think about what may arise. And the solitary judicial intervention on the subject is to be found in that famous Baby Mange case from the Supreme Court in 2008. Even that is now almost 6 years old and we still haven't formulated our legislation. So with these few words, I'll just take a brief moment. What I really would like to share with you is my few thoughts on the bill which has been proposed by the Government of India and what further needs to be done to address some of the issues. It's a very complex problem. Legally, as a person involved in the study of law and in adjudication, I can see that very, very important issues, especially relating to contracts and constitutional and fundamental human rights of different parties are going to arise, especially the rights of the child. We may be talking about rights of the surrogate mother, but to my mind, there is not enough conversation on rights of the child, which really needs to be highlighted. So, with India opening its floodgates in 1990s and embracing globalization, the health sector has also grown tremendously. On a parallel road, fertility levels have dipped from 3.4 children born per woman in 1990 to 92 to 2.9 children born per woman in 1998-99 to 2.62 as per the 2011 estimates. Globally, evidence indicates a 9% prevalence of infertility with 56% couples seeking medical care. These estimates are surprisingly similar between developed and developing countries. Of the many reproductive procedures available in modern times, one such procedure is surrogacy. The Indian Council of Medical Research has defined surrogacy as an arrangement which a woman agrees to carry a pregnancy that is genetically unrelated to her and her husband, with the intention to carry it to term and hand over the child to the genetic parents for whom she is acting as a surrogate. The guidelines also recognize surrogacy with oocyte donation. In surrogacy with oocyte donation, a woman allows insemination by the sperm of the male partner of a couple with a view to carry the pregnancy to term and hand over the child to the couple. Thus, surrogacy may be classified on the basis of gamete donation. The former situation where the surrogate mother has no genetic link with the zygote formed and carries the pregnancy to term is known as gestational surrogacy. The later scenario where the surrogate mother donates her gamete, which is fertilized with the gametes of the male partner of the couple, and carries the pregnancy to term is known as traditional surrogacy. At present, only gestational form of surrogacy is recognized in India. The commissioning couple through gestational surrogacy can have a child of their own, as the procedure involved uses the respective genetic material of the couple. Types of surrogacy may be also classified on financial basis as well. The two categories based on financial considerations are commercial surrogacy and altruistic surrogacy. Though most people would generally seek medical attention for fertility issues within their own countries, others may choose to travel to another country. This may be, of course, as we have seen, on account of factors such as lower costs, higher success rates, desire to protect their privacy, etc. The Supreme Court in the 2008 pronouncement, which I just referred to, has said that commercial surrogacy in India is reaching industry proportions. It is also perceived that women of color and those belonging to the third world in particular are sought to undertake what is taken as the menial task of childbearing. There are discussions that this has connotations of even slavery. Once the agreement has been signed by the parties involved, the intended surrogate mother agrees to not only carry the fetus to full term, but also in the event of unsuccessful implantation, she agrees to undergo the procedure repeatedly despite there being health hazards involved. There is hardly any confirmation that women participating as a surrogate mother in these arrangements have their human rights and physical and psychological health adequately protected. I've had occasion to discuss this informally, including with Diksha, and I'm sure she's going to share her experiences with you on how surrogate mothers, in the absence of any legislative regime to control or to regulate either the contract which is reached or the treatment to which mothers are subjected during the time that they're carrying the child. You see, whether their rights are at all even looked at, let alone addressed. In numerous cases, the Indian judiciary has held that the right to procreate and right to reproductive autonomy are facets of the right to life under Article 21. American courts have also observed this right to be constitutionally protected. Against this backdrop, surrogacy may be afforded even constitutional protection. The legitimacy of surrogacy was recognized by the Supreme Court in the 2000 Baby Mandi case. But the decision paused right there, as there are no legal provisions with regard to it, and debates as to ethical considerations remain. The ART clinics, that is the Assisted Reproductive Technique clinics, and others involved, such as prenatal health care provider, should ensure that the intended surrogate mother's right to privacy and autonomy are safeguarded. The surrogate mothers are often the subject of scrutiny by the society. They face the problems of living in secrecy and may put forth concocted stories about their pregnancies, primarily due to the social setting they come from and its pressures. These are also issues which we are not even beginning to talk about. The notion of autonomy cannot exist in vacuum. The more apt approach would be of relational autonomy, as humans are not isolated individuals. It must be recognized that all relationships, especially familial and intimate ones, necessarily involve both reliance upon and responsibility for others. Surrogate mothers likewise rely on family support. How far are they able to maintain their individual autonomy and consequently exercise their decision making is questionable given the influence that husbands and other family members can exert on them. Autonomy may again gain the spotlight during the pregnancy or postpartum. The right of the surrogate mother to live in the manner as she likes is often monitored during such arrangements. In addition, at the stage of postpartum, the surrogate mother may be forced to hand over the child in the shadow of the agreement entered into by the parties. There is no window period which is allowed by the ICMR guidelines, unlike laws in some of the developed countries, which allows the surrogate mother to step back and assess her decision of giving up the child that she bore and gave birth to. We may also consider the impact of financial penury of the surrogate mother in either deciding to bear the child as a surrogate mother, or her financial capacity or incapacity at the time she is compelled to give up the child. The enforcement of surrogacy agreements is fraught with uncertainty. Given that the dogmas of autonomy and privacy must be upheld and secured, the parties stand in murky waters in the event of the arrangement going sour. A prayer for the payment of damages or specific performance of the agreement would require the commissioning couple to walk a tightrope. And in this argument, we completely fail to see where does the child stand if either the surrogate mother or the parents who have commissioned the surrogacy fall apart on the manner in which the agreement is to be implemented and refuse to take over the child. The rights of both the genetic as well as the biological parents stand at crossroads as the process of surrogacy tends to redefine motherhood. The traditional and widely accepted concept of mother denotes that lady, that is the mother, as the mother of the child who gives actual birth to that child. Surrogacy places a question mark on this idea with the influx of genetic engineering, which makes possible the birth of the child from the womb of a woman who is genetically unrelated to it. With the onslaught of such processes, there has come about a debate as to factors which must be taken into account to determine the maternity of the child. Be that as it may, with the Indian Evidence Act 1872 providing the basis of conclusive proof of legitimacy, the child may be presumed to be the child of the surrogate mother and her husband. This in turn will not only challenge the impugned agreement between the surrogate mother and the commissioning couple, but also the couple's right to reproduce, which they sought to give effect to through this arrangement. Further, presuming that there may be an anonymous oocyte donor, it would entangle the concept of motherhood and consequently of a family. You see, this adds to a question which I have just had occasion to read a decision from the United Kingdom of the 1990s again, in which an issue arose as to what would happen to the child, what would the documents, what would the birth certificate reflect of such a child. I shudder to think what must be happening in our country where we have no legislation to govern that, and how are the surrogate parents taking over the child from the surrogate mother, taking over the mother, and what is being reflected on the birth certificates. So far as IVF procedures are concerned, I had occasion to deal with a case in which a single woman who decided to have a child by the IVF method, you see, went to the Municipal Corporation of Delhi seeking a birth certificate, and on the form she had to answer who was the father. Of course she didn't know, and she tried to explain to the NCT officials that she was a single mother and she didn't know who was the sperm donor, and so therefore there was no necessity of putting any name so far as the father's name was concerned. So the Municipal Corporation of Delhi simply asked her what is her father's name and put her father's name in the her father's name, that is the baby's grandfather's name, as the particulars of the father. So this lady had come to the court questioning the NCT's decision. It was completely wrong, and also questioning where was the requirement to identify the child by the father as well. Of course, it was a vexed issue. I had issued notice to the NCT, but the roster changed. We don't stay with the cases. So I don't know what happened to this case ultimately. But it's another area where without legislation, you see, We don't know what way the decision making will go and how it would be possible to justify the method which the MCD must adopt, So in these cases, so apropos the above, it is necessary to address the key issues surrounding the practice of surrogacy, which though haven't made their presence felt, nevertheless lurk as major points of strife. I briefly touch on some of the ethical issues which arise as to commercial surrogacy. These are issues you have a very good, very interesting and very pertinent outlay of subjects which you are going to be discussing today and tomorrow. But these are some of the ethical issues which I have flagged, which to my mind also, would need to be considered. What is which I don't know how legislation can at all affect or address. What is the degree of stress on the couple as well as the surrogate mother, especially having borne the baby, having borne the pregnancy for 9 months and they are having given birth to the child? Can true informed consent ever be given by the surrogate, and can anyone predict the emotions associated with relinquishing a child? What are the possible adverse psychological effects on the child? What identity crisis might ensue? And will there be a desire on the part of the child to know his or her gestational mother? Would it be in the interest of the child? Or what would weigh larger, the desire of the child to know his or her gestational mother, or the right to privacy of the surrogate mother? Will surrogate arrangements be used not only by infertile couples, but also for the sake of convenience, or by single men or women? Should the surrogate be paid? If not, then why not? Would this lead to commercialization of surrogacy and expose the surrogate mother to possible exploitation? What happens when no one wants a handicapped newborn? Should the couple and the surrogate remain unknown to each other? This is an area we have not even started a conversation on. Should the child be told? What about the rights of the child to know? What kinds of records should be kept? And should the child have access to them? What kind of medical and psychological screening should be provided to all the parties? What about the need for counseling of the parties and the child if the child is to be told about the method of birth? The drafted Assisted Reproductive Technology Regulation Bill 2010 acknowledges surrogacy agreements and the legal enforceability. However, there are certain areas where the bill falters. The bill neither creates, nor designates, nor authorizes any court or quasi-judicial forum for adjudication of disputes arising out of surrogacy, ART, and surrogacy agreements. Disputes may inter alia relate to parentage, nationality, issuance of passport, grant of visa. There is already a conflict on adoption and guardianship as non-Hindus. This comment I think is unwarranted now in the light of the provisions of the Juvenile Justice Act. But certain points that can be highlighted would include as what would be the remedy available to biological parents to obtain exclusive legal custody of surrogate children? How can the rights of the surrogate mother be waived completely? How can the rights of the ovum or the sperm donor be restricted? How can the genetic constitution of the surrogate baby be established and recorded with authenticity? Whether a single or a gay parent can be considered to be a custodial parent of a surrogate child? What would be the status of divorced biological parents in respect of the custody of the surrogate child? And would a biological parent be considered the legal parent of the surrogate child? These are some of the issues, some of which have arisen in foreign courts, but certainly the bill which has to be finalized into an enactment must anticipate the problems which will arise and address them. Of course, from the judge's point of view, very interesting legal questions which may be required to be answered by us. So far not arisen, but as we see that the regime and knowledge of rights grows and more people are becoming conscious of what is rightfully theirs, as well as learned persons as those in this room who will be taking up these issues, it is imperative that we anticipate these problems and issues and find answers before we grapple with them in the courts. I wish all of you a very, very lively and enriching discussions in the seminar. I'm sure the outcome is going to find answers to many of the issues which I flagged and raise many issues which I have not anticipated or thought about. I wish you all the best. Thank you.